So let's bring up the pro scouting staff for a team like the New Orleans Saints. When you have someone like Michael Thomas go down with ankle surgery, expected to miss the start of the season, about a 4-month recovery. So he's going to miss a significant part of the season right now. What do you do? The draft is over, and now it's like, okay, this is where you got to figure out a short-term replacement. The argument could easily be made that the Saints also needed a long-term complement to Michael Thomas. We just did our rankings for receiving units and just republished it and put it back out there. They're, I think, 5th worst in the NFL. That's with Michael Thomas. If you take him off that depth chart, this is the worst group of playmakers in the NFL, receivers and tight ends. And if you're going to get anything out of Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, they either need a whole bunch of guys who haven't done it yet to just emerge and become really good players, or they got to make a move. The Saints look like they're in some serious trouble with Michael Thomas out right now.
I like the people that are like, oh, you and your like high level, prime time only viewpoint, you guys just don't recognize the brilliance of Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith and the speed and the dynamism that's in this receiving core that's just waiting for an opportunity to be the number one now that Michael Thomas isn't there. Okay, yeah. I mean, look, we like Traquan Smith coming out. Like, he was a guy we thought would be a good player. Hasn't really lived up to...
He's been fine. He's been a good complementary receiver.
But I would say it's been disappointing compared to the potential we thought he had in him. And like Marquez Callaway, like the dude's got like 24 career targets. How much projection is involved in you going, we're okay. We don't need Michael Thomas. Marquez Callaway's just waiting to step into this bigger role. And you'd know that if you had been watching the Saints for more than the primetime games. I'm just like, there's a bunch of deluded people out there is all I'm saying.
Listen, you take the 3 people that have responded to you on Twitter and push them aside. Because that's what you're responding to. But it's the truth, right? I mean, that is the fandom. Next man up. I mean, look, we dealt with this with Colts fans earlier this offseason. I love T.Y. Hilton, and I love all the guys, Michael Pittman and the guys the Colts have. As numbers 2 and 3 on your depth chart, it's still going to make you a better team if you have a better receiver. And, when Jameis Winston, say what you want about Jameis Winston and all the picks and all that stuff, as an aggressive quarterback throughout his career, he has moved the ball, right? Jameis Winston-led teams have moved the ball. Now, they've also given it to the other team quite a bit, but they moved the ball because he had receivers to throw to. I don't want to see what Jameis looks like without that. I got to plug my computer in real quick, so you take over.
Oh, nice. Well, I was going to ask you a question. I was going to ask, do you think that losing Michael Thomas affects who they start at quarterback? Because, we're still in this world where I think everybody assumes it's going to be Jameis Winston, but Taysom Hill is the guy sitting there on the relatively big, however fake money it is, contract. I don't think that this is a foregone conclusion that Jameis Winston is their starting quarterback. And I actually think you can construct an argument that says that Taysom Hill is a smarter way of doing it, right? Because you're not like Jameis Winston is not going to be able to replicate the offense you had with Drew Brees. You're going to have to fundamentally change a lot of pieces of that offense, which was built a lot around Brees not making big mistakes, or not making mistakes, period, right? So forget big mistakes. Forget the idea that Jameis is a turnover machine and Brees relatively isn't, although his career turnover-worthy play rate is not in the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady. It's not in the same place, right? He's not one of the most risk-averse quarterbacks in the NFL, never has been. But he offsets that by being arguably the most accurate quarterback we've ever seen, right? So general mistakes, the difference between Jameis and Brees is night and day. It's 2 different ends of the spectrum. So you can't just throw Jameis out there and say, okay, do what you do, only don't make as many mistakes. Because he's not capable of doing that. Sean Payton can't just wave a magic wand at him and say, boom, done. Now Jameis doesn't screw up anymore. Over his career, Jameis Winston, I think, has got the 7th percentile in terms of percentage of negatively graded throws, right? So turnovers and just inaccuracy, misses, all that kind of thing.
In part because they've thrown down the field a lot more. That's just
right. But even eliminating the Arians year, it's still the bottom end of the league.
Well, that's the thing. But Jameis has always been in a downfield passing offense.
Right. But he's also always, I think he tends in that direction anyway, like independent of the offense.
Right. Part of it's Part of it's him, part of it's the system.
So I just don't think that you're going to change that much of who Jameis is, at which point that offense doesn't look the same. It doesn't work the same. It's not as good. If you're accepting that you're going from like Hall of Fame quarterback to something worse, why not try and build an offense that functions around a guy's unique skill set and say, all right, Taysom Hill's never going to be a great passing quarterback. He's never going to put up 5,000 yards. He's never going to look, like these other guys. On the other hand, the only guy out there who's like a more dynamic rushing threat is arguably Lamar Jackson. So why not build off that? Why not say, all right, let's try and stop him fumbling the ball, which feels like something we can achieve. He didn't have that many mistakes. He's not ball location accurate, but he throws a catchable ball, right? It typically is not an uncatchable, inaccurate throw. It's generally not ideal location, but it hits the guy where it needs to go. So he can actually execute this offense and move the ball. And if you cut down the number of times he fumbles, it's a functional offense and an offense that's difficult to defend every week, unlike the one you would be running if you put Jameis Winston in there.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. As much as I want to see more Jameis data points, my point is you're either building a receiving core that's going to play to Jameis's strengths, which is throwing the ball down the field, right? And I'm not saying 50 yards down the field. I'm saying that 10 to 25 yard range, that intermediate to mostly the intermediate plus range. Jameis is really good there. Post routes, deep outs, and the reason why he had such a high percentage of positives and negatives and had that volatility, because that's what he does. The vertical route tree is what Jameis does. But if you're telling me that he's going to do that with Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, he's a dynamic punt returner who could be a deep threat there, here and there. But just hear the descriptions. Marquez Callaway is not running away from anybody. He's not a great route runner, big-bodied receiver. Deontay Harris, a part-time receiver with speed. Traquan Smith, a good number 3 receiver. It's what he is. It's what the Saints have, right? Even the most optimistic Saints fan, if the best case scenario happens for all those guys, you're still sitting there. You have to compare yourself to the rest of the league and say our passing attack is now Jameis Winston, probably not a top 15 to 20 quarterback in today's NFL. Jameis Winston throwing to this group of receivers who, even if they're great, probably aren't better than top 15 to 20. So you got to be realistic about this. It matters what the rest of the league is doing. So I kind of agree with you. So if you with Michael Thomas healthy, he's the best chance for making Jameis a better decision maker and taking away some of those misses. Michael Thomas is one of the best underneath and intermediate route runners in the NFL. But now that he's gone, I'm kind of with you that Taysom might be the guy to do something unconventional and play to the strength of your team, which is the offensive line, Alvin Kamara, and then Taysom Hill's dual threat ability.
I also think, all things being equal, I might lean Taysom Hill anyway, but the worse your receiving core is, the more I think you're going to need to rely on something other than the receivers to get them opportunities, to get them open, to scheme them open, which is this rushing type of offense, again, similar to what Baltimore do. Like Lamar Jackson has easier throws because Lamar Jackson is a unique rushing threat that creates space, right? This is what we said since dating back to Louisville. Like he makes easier throws for himself because he's such a dynamic rushing threat. Taysom Hill is not Lamar Jackson, but him being such an important component of the run game can achieve similar things, and it can create bigger windows because suddenly linebackers have to focus on the quarterback's first step and the threat that he runs the ball, and they're not 2 yards to their right cutting off a slant. So, a guy that isn't getting a ton of separation just has a bigger window to work with because of what Taysom Hill can do. The other component I think that's missing from this is Taysom Hill as a starter is extremely young. Now, I know he's 30 years old, right? I'm talking experience-wise, not age.
He's young compared to us, too.
Yes. But, he is a young player in terms of experience who was never, practiced as a quarterback. This is a dude who spent his entire life preparing week to week to be a gimmick, right? Go run coverage on the kickoff team while we're, working on passing drills, right? What if you give him an offseason to actually say, hey, you're going to be a quarterback. How about you practice that for a while? I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that his capability as a passer improves by practicing it, is all I'm saying.
I'm just sitting here in awe of of how the propaganda has gotten to you.
I'm Team Taysom.
The propaganda has gotten to you.
I don't even think it would be good. Like I've said all along.
Listen, hold on. We need to do a better job of being able to find our archived stuff and just pull it up on demand here. 2 years ago, hearing your takes about Sean Payton even remotely thinking about Steve Young in the same conversation as Taysom Hill.
It's still ridiculous.
And Sean Payton using the same arguments that he's a punt protector. The dude can't even, he hasn't even taken a snap yet. The potential's through the roof. And you're here 2 years later just reciting the propaganda back to our millions of listeners, completely swayed and changed like it's Soviet Russia in the 70s and 80s. Incredible, Sam. Incredible. That you bought into the propaganda.
The difference is Sean Payton was talking about this guy being Steve Young. I am talking about him being the best option of a crappy selection, right? Being viable, being maybe better than Jameis Winston and his 30 interceptions a season.
You're one good week away from putting Taysom in the Hall of Fame with Steve Young.
The very first thing, somebody found this article, like the first time I wrote about this idea of Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback, my conclusion was essentially, I think there's an interesting NFL offense that Sean Payton in particular can craft around Taysom Hill that makes him an intriguing starting quarterback. I just don't see the reason why you bother, right? Now I see the reason why you bother, because your alternative is Jameis Winston doing a bad Drew Brees impersonation, right? When you had Drew Brees and you were like looking down the line at like, what is our potential successor? I don't get why you go to all this trouble to make Taysom Hill that, right? When you can just draft a guy, like draft a dude in the second round, like draft Kellen Mond, right? Drafting Kellen Mond is a better succession plan than this, like, let's create a bespoke Taysom Hill offense because that's how we're going to best transition away from Drew Brees. But they didn't do that. So their alternatives are, do you create this custom offense around Taysom Hill that might actually be viable and difficult to defend and kind of good? Or do you throw Jameis Winston in there and just hope that he can stop throwing the ball either at the floor or defenders? Or do you put Ian Book out there who has literally nothing that says that he can be a viable starting quarterback? Of those options, Taysom Hill is the lesser of three evils.
So what I'm hearing is you've completely bought into Taysom Hill and you put him in the Hall of Fame. He's the next Steve Young. Sold. The propaganda has gotten to Sam. Let's move on.